Now, over the weekend, I was doing a bunch of updates to my Proxmox systems, and I broke some stuff. Maybe you did too. The issue I've run into is that my Docker containers won't start inside an LXC anymore. And the issue that I get is this one here. sysctl net IPv4 unprivileged port start file reopen FD8 permission denied. This is an AppArmor issue, and I'm going to show you before the intro rolls, so that I'm not going to do the typical YouTuber thing and make you watch to the end. I'm just going to show you how to fix it right away, or at least work around it right away so that you can get up and running as fast as possible. So what we want to do is jump straight to the console of our Proxmox host here, find the LXC configuration file. In my case, that's 1000. And then we want to, I'll put a link to this blog post, by the way, in the description down below from my personal blog. We want to just make our LXC container become unconfined. If you're familiar with SE Linux, this is the same as just disabling SE Linux, but on a per LXC basis. It's not ideal, and I'll get into all of that stuff and the why we're doing this later on in the video. But for right now, we just want to do LXC AppArmor profile unconfined. As soon as we've done that, we'll do pct stop 1000, or whatever your VM ID is for the container, and then pct start 1000. And then you can see that we get an error message here saying if you've explicitly configured an AppArmor profile, it will override the setting features nesting. Now, I used to think that nesting was required for Docker to work inside an LXC. That's apparently not true because it works just fine without it. I'm going to log in now to my LXC container and do docker compose up -d, and you can see now that my tsidp Docker container starts just fine. So all you need to do to get back up and running as quickly as possible is just disable AppArmor for this LXC, and that will get you back up and running as fast as you can. Now, if you want to understand more about why we need to do that, well, stick about, because I'm about to tell you. So what is the problem? Well, first of all, this is not a Proxmox bug. It's not specifically even really a Docker bug either. Around November 5th, containerd.io version 1.7.28-2 landed with a critical security patch. And this is where they were fixing CVE 2025-52881. This is a pretty serious container escape vulnerability, so it had to be patched. The problem is that the fix involves reopening file descriptors for procfs operations. This unfortunately triggers an AppArmor permissions error when you're running Docker inside LXC containers. And if you're like me, you run Docker in LXC on Proxmox a lot, and that probably means you had a bad start to your week. So in terms of like a technical explanation, I'll try and make this as simple as I can, because I'll be honest, some of this stuff I don't fully understand myself, but it's actually a pretty interesting, like the containerization space is like a layer cake, and there's all sorts of different moving pieces. And in this one, it was containerd that we had to update. So let me tell you a little bit about detached mounts and why they are causing the issues here today. You can kind of think of a normal mount a little bit like when you plug in a drive to a system, you mount it to a path like /mount/data. When you mount that drive, it is what is called an attached mount. Well, what an LXC does is a detached mount, and that is quite different. It exists only in the kernel, and it's mounted but not attached to any path in your file system tree. It's just floating in memory. You can only access it through file descriptors. Well, runc, which is the containerization library, you can think of it like that runs or helps run containers, uses detached mounts as a security feature to help avoid race conditions. And without detached mounts, an attacker could potentially swap out mount points whilst runc is trying to access them. And detached mounts help prevent that. The trouble here, though, is that AppArmor is path-based. It needs to see actual file system paths to be able to make security decisions. So when the kernel tries to generate a path name for files inside a detached mount, which AppArmor needs, it can only see the relative path from the mount root. So really, it's just a mismatch between two security features runc is using detached mounts to prevent path-based attacks, and AppArmor needs actual paths to make these decisions. The two are conflicting and fighting each other. Now, those of you in the Red Hat ecosystem are almost certainly familiar with SE Linux, which is a very similar type of tool. It's an access or privileged access tool that controls who is allowed to access what inside of a Linux system. Now, SE Linux wouldn't be affected by this problem because it's label-based, not path-based. It assigns security labels directly to files and processes, so SE Linux itself doesn't care about paths. But Proxmox, because it's in the Ubuntu and Debian ecosystem, uses AppArmor. So here we are, I'm afraid. Now, I already covered the fix earlier in the video, and I want to just give you a few caveats. Running an LXC with an unconfined LXC AppArmor profile is about the same as just disabling SE Linux on a Red Hat system. You remove many of the protections that an LXC promises in the first place by doing so. However, if you're running Docker inside an LXC, as of right now at least, until this gets patched or a proper workaround from upstream comes down, this is the only option you've got to just get things back up and running. It's not exactly an ideal long-term solution. There is also a trick where you can make Docker think that AppArmor is disabled with this command here, but yeah, that is potentially even more icky than the LXC unconfined option that we defined earlier. Now, I will put a link to my own personal blog post in the description down below. Obviously, this is the Tailscale channel, so I'm keeping personal opinion out of this one. But if you want to read more of my thoughts on the issue, you can find that linked down below. Now, one of the reasons that I actually even recommend running Docker inside an LXC in the first place is because of iGPU sharing, or Intel QuickSync, really. I often run containers directly on the Proxmox node itself. And I know that the Proxmox project itself doesn't like people doing that. For whatever reason, they decided that running Docker on the Proxmox host just wasn't something they wanted to officially support. However, running Docker inside an LXC container, I don't believe there's been an explicit statement from the Proxmox project declaring that this is not a supported configuration. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments down below, but I did a fair amount of research into this video and couldn't find anything. LXCs do provide some benefits, of course. You know, you've got isolation, you keep the host clean, you can share an iGPU between multiple LXCs, and in fact, that's exactly why I do it. So my Plex LXC and my Jellyfin LXC and all of these things, I can have them segmented. But unlike where I'm doing PCIe pass-through with a GPU, trying to do that with an integrated CPU iGPU, there's too many acronyms here, I know, but basically the graphics card that's built into your CPU that has Intel's QuickSync that's so good for video transcoding, trying to pass that through like you would with a discrete PCIe GPU to a virtual machine even, it's just not reliable. I've tried it many times. I've even done things with Intel's GVTG technology where you can just kind of slice things up. It's just not reliable. And the kind of compromised solution that I came to over the years was to use LXCs. I end up with all the benefits of a virtual machine, ostensibly. I've got some kind of separation. I've got my own init system inside an LXC. But they're a lot lighter weight, and I can also share one iGPU across multiple LXCs. But issues like this make it really tricky to kind of advocate for that approach, and I know many of you in the comments on the TSIDP video, I know many of you run into this issue as well, so hopefully today's workaround, because that's all it is, gets you back up and running. There you go. Well, there was a lot of stuff. There you have it. Your containers broke because of a critical security fix. So we've got to fix these things. But that critical security fix unfortunately conflicted with AppArmor's path-based security model. And as I said, you can kind of work around it by disabling AppArmor on an LXC container, and it is a per container basis. But the real solution here needs to come from either the container runtime folks or the AppArmor folks figuring out how to make detached mounts kind of work with path-based control. Maybe Proxmox can find an alternative to AppArmor. I find that very unlikely though. If this video helped you, please get subscribed. I think we're just about to cross 50,000 subscribers this week, which is absolutely insane. I'll be doing a dedicated video on that next week, I think. And if you want to see more content about Proxmox, Home Labs, and all the weird technical problems that I run into, you know where to find me. Drop a comment down below. Let me know if you've been affected by this. I'll put links in the description to everything that I've talked about today, all of the upstream GitHub issues, the blog posts, all the rest of it. I think that's all I need to say for today. So as always, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, I've been Alex from Tailscale.